Well, good morning.
Good morning.
There was more than 3 inches in my rain gauge this morning. Wasn't the air so fresh, and every blade of grass this morning said, ah. Welcome. Welcome on a beautiful fresh morning here in Vero Beach, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Vero Beach. We are so pleased that you've decided to begin what I think will be a lovely day here with us. We are a congregation of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands, people seeking to become our best individual selves, even as together as a religious community and a moral community, we work to make this world a better place. And please know that you are welcome precisely as you come to us in all of your human identities and particularities, young, old, gay, straight, black, white, Latino, however you come to us, we welcome you. We hope you will find our service this morning meaningful and enriching. I think knowing that Cindi is doing it, it'll be lovely and fun. And that you'll take something with you from this morning that will nourish and feed your life in joyful and more meaningful ways.
A prayer for ancestors throughout the generations by Master Cindi. O great compassionate Buddha, we would like to express to you our gratitude to our relatives and ask blessings for them throughout the generations. We attribute our ability to live and work in peace and contentment now to the diligence and efforts of our relatives throughout the generations. They left abundant fortunes for us so that we can live a civilized life. They established fine lives for us so that we can enjoy a life of convenience. We gather to remember the things that made a special place in our heart, to remember those happy times and those times when our hearts broke. We gather to remember those who came before us, for who could put a price on memories. Your community responses today will be, with the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you. Every man is a quotation from all his ancestors.
With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you.
From Michael Creighton. If you don't know your history, you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree.
With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you.
From Maya Angelou. We need to haunt the house of history and listen anew to the ancestors' wisdom.
With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you.
From Mark Twain. Why waste time looking up your family tree? Go into politics and your ancestors will do it for you.
With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you.
And lastly, some family trees have beautiful leaves, and some have a bunch of nuts. Remember, it is the nuts that make the tree worth shaking.
With the gift of remembrance, I remember all of you.
Okay, so Halloween is this week. Last year I attended the UU in Jacksonville, which celebrated the feast of Samhain, which is the traditional pagan homage to ancestors. Our own Halloween culture evolved from this ritual and morphed into the Christian holidays of All Souls Day and All Saints Day. In fact, any respectable former Catholic probably has a recollection of having to pick a saint to emulate during Catholic school days. Do any of you remember that? You had to be a saint. It was especially fun if you picked a martyr who had died by having been stoned, shot through with arrows, or being beheaded. They made for really great costumes. Today, we are going to throw all science to the wind. We will celebrate ancestors, but without speaking of the physical and genetic traits that we have acquired for them. Let's instead talk about the nostalgia and yearning that we seem to feel for those who have come before. As a matter of fact, this nostalgia and yearning is probably that signified. Look at the begots. Do you remember the begots from the Bible? Ancestors are very, very important. And if you look at this, I forget how many begots there were, but I think this is the granddaddy of all family trees. Many cultures have an intense sense of reverence for their ancestors, giving them much-needed resources to placate the spirits of the ancestors to honor them. Claudia's story today was a wonderful illustration of this. In my own family, we have a tradition called an empty plate. On Christmas Eve, in Lithuanian tradition, we have an empty plate setting set so that all our ancestors who are no longer with us will be joining us at that dinner. In Laos last year, my friend and I were walking around, and there were little plates of food set up all over the place. This in Vientiane, the capital. And we were like, why are people putting all this food out? Some of these people are really poor, didn't have enough food for themselves. And there was an evening that they were setting out food for all their ancestors. It was very, very interesting. I'm not sure what happened overnight, but it was sure there when we went to bed that night. So again, we're going to go through a nostalgic tour. We're going to forget that most of us probably don't believe that our ancestors are hanging around in a room waiting for us. We're just going to pretend that we believe all that for this little exercise here. Our ancestry can be a blessing and a curse. Family lineage can dictate one's social class. It is invariably advantageous to be a Windsor or a Rockefeller, but not so good to be a Madoff or a Manson. Ancestry can dictate a life condemned to poverty in a caste system or preference to universities and politics through legacy. It can curse us to retain old resentments, hence the Hatfields and McCoys, for wrongs done in the far past, and combine us to archaic traditions that cause exclusion of other groups. For many of us, it provides an anchor, sense of belonging, and pride, wonderful traditions that include food, festivities, and celebrations. I am an ancestry junkie. I am one of those people who have done the DNA test, just like 7 other million Americans in this country. So if you can imagine the money that people are making off this yearning for our ancestry. I was marinated in hero worship for all things and persons who are associated with my ancestors in Lithuania. My ancestors' meager beginnings were similar to many of yours. Peasant folks, women wearing babushkas, and men who sang in perfect harmony these wonderful songs from the old country, and had a very strong affinity for spirits, and I don't mean the Halloween spirits either. They came here on steerage, and we were raised to revere their tenacity and courage, while somehow buildings and artwork with which to memorize their ancestors. I want to show you what I have. I have this box. My grandfather brought all his possessions over from Lithuania in this box. And to me, if I had a building named after him in Central Park or wherever, it would not mean more than this. Inside this box, I had dirt. When I went to Lithuania, I went to my great-grandfather's grave. All Lithuanians, it seems like when we go over there, we spend all these time at graves. It's just what we do. I also have this clump of beeswax that he brought over with him. Does anybody have any idea what beeswax was used for?
Mustache?
He was a tailor, and he used beeswax to wax your thread. So this is part of this big chunk of beeswax he brought over from Lithuania with him to begin his career. It's an obligatory pilgrimage if you are an immigrant's child, it seems, to go to see the dirt floors where they were born and to pay respects at all these well-tended plots. This is my grandfather. His name is Jonas Matamonis. I never met him. He died when my father was only 10 years old. But he is the one that came with this box, a clod of beeswax in a dream. And because he did come, I am here today. I learned so much about all of you while collecting your stories. I did have a profound revelation that binds almost all of us. We are all here because somebody got on a damn boat. Unless you're a recent immigrant, think about it. Somebody in our family decided to get on a boat. Now, some got on willingly. Of course, there's the Ellis Island typical boat there. There's the boat that would be reminiscent of the Mayflower, and the middle boat would have been a slave ship. So I don't think the people got on the slave ship as willingly as my grandparents got on the boat to Ellis Island, but somebody, somewhere, got on the boat, and hence we are all here today, except for a few of you who are more recent immigrants. My aunt always thought heaven would be a place where all ancestors would greet you with love and joy, and for the next moment, let's pretend she was right. Don't you really wish you could embrace or shake the hand of an ancestor, the two of you smiling in that way that your cheeks hurt because you're so happy to see each other? So I'm going to take you for a journey that was written by you. So I'm going to go through the information that you sent me and tell you a little bit about the ancestor that we are honoring. This beautiful lady is P. Kersey's great-grandmother, Mary Ellen Noel Kersey. He would ask her about her life in the late 1800s and early 1900s, about where she and her husband William were finally buried, and where William's parents and her parents were buried. Claudia Jimenez. She would like to have lunch with Isabel de Prieto, or Chavita. Did I say that correctly? Chavita. She was her grandmother who raised her during adolescence. She believed in social justice and worked with the poor. Claudia would love to have lunch with her and talk about her own spiritual journey and call to ministry. She also wonders what Chavita would think of her non-creed spirituality. Effington Brown Sutton. Effington is Woody's great-great-grandfather. He was in the transportation business, which kind of makes you wonder if things are genetic a little bit, right? He started a clipper business in time for the gold rush. He enjoyed another career as a real estate developer on the Upper East Side, where the posh Sutton Place area is now. Woody would like to know what his inspiration was to start a transportation business, how it was structured, and how he got into real estate. Wendy Oliver's grandmother, Aunt Estella Joseph, was a Ziegfeld Follies girl. Her stage name was Bunny Wendell, which resulted in Wendy being named Wendy. She married a German Jew, which did not sit well with either family. She would like to know all about her exciting life and about her Irish ancestor. Nancy Spalding had a grandfather named John O'Neill, and this picture I just put up of a ship because we did not have one. He was from Newfoundland and a member of the Cape Horn Square Rig School of the Sail. As a merchant marine, he touched every port in the world and was shipwrecked off Nantucket in 1887, one of only 14 to survive. Sunalipa, meet Amy Cohn Mathers of White Springs, Sue's maternal grandmother. She was a real-life cracker. She was an independent woman, married and divorced twice, and raising her kids to be educated. Sue would like to know her history and her motivation. Ellen Rance. She recently found out about Roswell Moore Shirtcliffe from Green, New Hampshire. He and she shared a 7th grade grandfather. He studied art at the Lowell Institute in Boston at the National Academy of Design in New York. He was the first Union officer taken prisoner in the Civil War. His work can be seen at the Metropolitan National Gallery of Art and others, and he did sketches for Mark Twain's book. She would like to talk about him and their common ancestry and art. And Ellen, I did find this picture. I Googled this picture. It is one of his paintings. Whoops. Okay, here is Aunt Lolly, Joyce Levy's Aunt Lolly. Joyce loved her wonderful Aunt Lolly. She was the only one of her 5 siblings to attend college. She and her husband were childless, and she smothered her nieces and nephews with love. She shared her wisdom, her faith, and taught them proper English and manners. She loved unconditionally. Joyce would like to have a conversation with Aunt Lolly about her travels in Colorado, Florida, and New York. Mary Woodward's grandmother, Katrina Yokobanika, married Baltramius Ambrosaitis. I can say that because it's Lithuanian. Their daughter Mariona was born in Cindi, where my family was from in Lithuania in 1857. Mary married Tamasius Tunila. That one was even tough for me. Look at that beautiful Lithuanian lady there. Holly Mader, she gets the prize for tenacity. She got me this picture of Emily Campbell Adams, her dad's mom, at 12:30 this morning. Her conversation would be about her age when she and her brother and sister left Scotland after their parents died in Colorado. Where did they live? Who took care of them? She would like to say you were so brave, and I know you traveled. You wore beautiful earrings and always wore a dress and nylons. And you always smelled so sweet like lavender and always carried a lovely handkerchief. And loved your tea in the morning and afternoon along with the sweet. I am so grateful for taking the time to remember you once again. I love you. Bob Weber. Bob's great-grandfather is Zina Goodell, had a machine shop and early auto shop in Salem, Mass. During the lunch that he would have with his grandfather, Bob and he would discuss their families, about how the world has changed since Zina died in 1920, and about their businesses. He would tell him that he used to drive by the building named after him in Salem. Bob plans on joining him in the distant future in the Harmony Grove Cemetery in Salem. Bonnie Pendleton's ancestor's name is William Brewster, and he came over on the Mayflower. He was a postmaster and English teacher. They would talk about daily life in Plymouth and compare notes, since they are fellow English teachers. Amy Matalazzo. Here is Amy and her grandmother, Anna Gorchicki, with whom she was very close until her death when Amy was 9. She would have lots of questions about her life in Poland and leaving Poland. She would like to know why and how she left. Did she keep in contact with her childhood friend in the U.S.? How did you get from Poland to Baltimore and then to Detroit? And here's an important question. Why didn't you and Grandpa go to Uncle Frank's funeral? Your oldest son, my Uncle Stanley, was the only one in the family who went to the funeral, and Uncle Stan said Uncle Frank's funeral was something to see. Joe Hardy's paternal grandfather, Albert Sidney Hardy. Joe would like to have lunch with both of his grandfathers, actually, since he never had a chance to meet either as they died before he was born. They would get to meet each other and their grandson. Now, Al Parmentier was slow in the pictures. He did say that his great-grandfather emigrated from Belgium with his grandfather, and the only thing I could find from Belgium with a Parmentier on it was a can of sardines, so maybe he had the sardines. And this is the French Woonsocket, Rhode Island French worsted mill factory where he worked. Whoops. Oh, darn. Okay, Crystal, of course, is very poetic when she talks of her ancestor, Janie Tillman. She was the daughter of a slave, a midwife-type woman, a healer in the Deep South, knowledgeable about roots and herbs and leaves and their healing qualities. Crystal would like to ask her about her healing recipes, her family, her love life, and what it was like to be a strong Black woman. Spike Grusho. Spike's father, Vero, came from Albania. His father's father died when Spike was actually a baby. He would like to know how he got over here. Was his dad, did his grandfather send his dad over as an unaccompanied minor? What was like in Albania? What kind of work did he do? Was there plumbing, outhouses? Did they have animals? Did they have pets? Lisa Turano is introducing Leona Grapperhauser, her great-grandmother who died in 1986, just shy of her 100th birthday. From Lisa's discussion, Leona was a tough old broad who was bound by the Catholic expectations of having kids, which apparently she did regrettably. She loved parties and beer. Lisa would like to ask her what it was like to be a newlywed in 1909 and what life she would have wanted for herself, and she'd be allowed to choose it. Now, I have it from reliable sources. This is the actual portrait of people during the Salem witch trial. Jim Brewer would like to meet Sarah Town Floyd. She was one of 3 sisters accused of witchcraft, and he knows that her 2 sisters, Rebecca and Mary, were hung. Sarah's husband, Peter, helped her escape into the wilderness that is now Farmington. He would like to know how they survived their first winter. Did they meet other settlers, and how did they treat them since they had this little witchy thing in the background? Did you ever meet your daughter's father-in-law, Captain John Brewer, who brought the family name to America? You might be related to Scott. You know that.
I also descend from her. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey. Kim McIntyre. This is Kim's great-grandfather, Antonio Chadinha. Did I say that right? He was a big part of her life until he died when she was 5. He was in seminary in the Azores until he came to the U.S. at the age of 18. His family owned a tea plantation there. Kim has been back there to stay in his home. She would like to ask him about his years growing up and his journey to America. Gail Parmentier found her relative Edward Mitchell. This is really a great story. Late 18th century Methodist preacher. He was an abolitionist. In 1790, he freed his 8 slaves and committed to their future welfare. Then he led a wagon train of black and white settlers out of Virginia to Illinois, and he taught his daughter's husbands into setting their slaves free also. Gail would like to learn from him their lives in a free state. Johnny New Perry came from a long line of Pickens, traced back to Jane and Allen Pickens, her great-great-grandparents who were born in 1824 and 1840 as slaves. She doesn't have any pictures of these folks, but there are pictures of descendants. Johnny would like to commend them for their strength, for surviving forced labor, rape, and indignity. She would like them to know how they are loved, and that their memories are kept alive at family reunions. Johnny says that the Pickens clan is anchored in love, and that she is so proud to be a 5th-generation descendant. Here is Watson Stewart, Marion's great-grandfather, who was married to Elizabeth Tipton Stewart. They were born in 1832 and 1827. They led a very adventurous life. They both had tragic, impoverished childhoods. Watson eked out a living at the age of 16, stone cutting, doing traveling shows of mesmerism and phrenology, and demonstrations of batteries. They married and went to live in the Osage Indian Territory to be part of an abolitionist, vegetarian, alcohol-abstinent group. They were participants in the struggles of free versus slave states in the Civil War. Their home became a place for debate and gathering. Sounds like UU's in the making, doesn't it? Here's Grandma Frona Mentine. She worked until the age of 80 and baked a cake every Sunday. Every Thanksgiving, she made incredible dumplings simmered in turkey broth called poor man's dumplings. All there were lessons. Sue's attempts were messy clogs of dough. Afterwards, they would have a coffee and a piece of cake. And Sue would love to be able to sit and have that coffee and cake with her again. Kristen Fernforth. She never met her mom's dad, Nils Johnson. He died just before she was born. He was a great adventurer, but a poor businessman. This is back in Sweden. He was in the nylon stocking business with Erling Persson during World War II. Erling wanted to diversify, but Nils didn't, so they parted ways. While his partner's company went on to become H&M Clothing Company, one of the biggest in the world. Kristen would like to know the whole story. She said, the Persson family's wealth doesn't make them any happier than her own families, but it does make for some great what-if stories, right? Here is Otis Wheeler. He is the son of Millie's grandfather, William Van Rudy Wheeler, who was born in 1832 in Pittsburgh, but grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. This is a true Civil War story. 4 brothers fought for the North, 2 for the South. William fought for the North, but united with his brother Thomas, who fought for the South after the war, and where they went to Homestead, Kansas. William served in Sherman's March to the Sea. This is William's son Otis, as I said, who was a traveling preacher on the Kansas prairie. Millie would like to hear their wisdom about surviving and healing a divided country. And here is Scott. Do you recognize this guy? General George McClellan, who was the head honcho of the Union Army until he was relieved to give the position to Ulysses S. Grant. He is Scott's ancestor on his father's mother's side. It has been said that his soldiers loved him because he truly cared about their lives. Scott would like to ask him about his career. How would you respond to say that your battlefield decisions were too timid? Susie Bromwell. This handsome man is Isham Blake, Susie's 4th great-grandfather, who was born in 1766 in the great colony of Virginia. He was a fighter during the Revolutionary War. He became a bodyguard for General Lafayette, which placed him in key battles, including the surrender of Yorktown. How cool is that? He founded a Methodist church after the war and enjoyed a successful business and marriage. Susie would like to ask him about George Washington and Lafayette. What were they like? How did they inspire their troops? Terry Domino, she doesn't have a picture, so this is a picture of Ellis Island, the hall where how many of you guys had anybody come through Ellis Island? Anybody here? Yeah, tons of us, right? This is the hall where people first came in to register at Ellis Island. So her ancestors were Rocco Bartolucci, Teresa Safuni, Paul Domino, and Grace Cusinelli. They were typical of many of our grandparents, impoverished and traveling in steerage. She would like to ask them why they left Italy, and were they glad that they made the move and ended up here. Kathy Barnes wished she could have lunch with her mother's mother, Susan Wilson Gaunt. She left England in the early 1900s to join her sweetheart here and became his wife. It would have been quite a change because even though she did speak English, it was just funny English. Susan Wilson Gaunt had 6 children and lost 2 of them early in their infancy. She died of cancer in her early 50s, several years before Kathy was born. Kathy says, how I would love to hear stories about the old country and adjusting to life in the U.S. Sally Wilson's grandparents. Dominica Mary Juresco Marlowe and Giuseppe Joseph Marlowe. They were her maternal grandparents. She would like to ask them how they found the courage to, and why they immigrated from Sicily, and if they spoke English before they came here. Jean Baker and Nancy Nugent's mother was Doris Book. She would love to tell her how happy and healthy her children and grandchildren are, and how much she misses them. David Kimball had a relative named Floyd Whitcomb in Richburg, New York. He was the only person in town to build his own greenhouse and actually cultivated flowers through grafting, and he built his own radio. His mother often compared the 2 of them, and David knows that she adored him. So that's the exploration of our ancestors. If we could think again, if we could really see them, really touch them, really have dinner with them, what a joyful occasion that would be. And this is an interesting poem that I found in conclusion. If you could see your ancestors all standing in a row, would you be proud of them or not? Or don't you really know? But here's another question which requires a different view. If you could meet your ancestors, would they be proud of you? Let us give praise to our ancestors and give praise to all that came before us in this struggle. Let us give praise to our elders and give praise to all those who have cared for us, protected us, guided us, and loved us.